Rigid slab construction. I think, and I was talking with our grad students this morning, it's such an attraction in general for most people to the material to work in plastic, wet material, because of its immediacy, because of how it captures information and its soft plasticity. What may be longer to come to is the fact that clay can also be made to look very mechanical and hard and geometric. And of course, in the world of sculptural form, those rational forms, those inorganic forms, maybe hold just as much weight as the organic ones do. So I guess what I wanted to throw out today is a way of beginning to build that really builds in the possibility of this hardness, of these angles, of the precision that we think of as many of those mechanical shapes to have. So before you even begin to build, you have to set up your slab into its drier state. I'm going to just pass this around. This is a little on the drier side. This one is probably better. It's got a little more flex to it. Pass it around. So what it takes is planning. It takes time because we're waiting for something to dry. It takes the patience of watching something until it's ready. And this is, if you can probably tell already, is something that's really hard for many people working in clay, is waiting till it's ready for you to touch it next with the kind of potential that stage has for implementing a change. So I did that. I wrapped my slabs. I waited almost 2 weeks, and they were still too wet because I didn't really check on them. But I put them on the plaster, and the plaster stiffened one side, the air dried the other by the window, and I was able to get them there so the cooking show could happen today. So it really is a little bit, no matter what your experience, a thing. So this technique, there's many, many applications, of course, but I'm going to just show you one way of building. As a student this morning said, oh, we're building gingerbread houses. Yeah, we're kind of building gingerbread houses. This project started with paper templates. And what these do, because working with a material like just printer paper, allowed me to envision the pattern, flat 2D pattern pieces that will come together to describe my geometric hollow form with precision. I know these all fit. So in my case, fairly simple project, I have 3 different pieces. This is how they will come together. This will be repeated on 4 sides. It angles in to make a trapezoidal hollow form. Okay. So I went ahead, because I didn't feel like you needed to watch me lay this paper down and trace it on my leather hard piece. I did that. Then I cut them all out. I waited to make sure that my fairly sharp knife, if this is too soft, will be imprecise when I cut because it'll drag. But these are pretty good. So I'm going to go through just the simple building now. I'm going to build on top of this bigger shape, and I'll explain why in a minute. So what you need, of course, whenever you have 2 drier pieces that come together, you've got a little bit of a problem to begin with about the seams, because the stiffer material has less moisture for it to shrink successfully together in the rest of the drying than if you're starting out trying to get wet on wet or wetter clay. So the drier your pieces, the more those seams will have to be nurtured, and that looks like making sure they're really compressed when you're joining them, and maybe adding material, and certainly slow drying to minimize the the quickness of the shrinkage. So if I take my cutout shapes and I just put them together, they're not going to fit because my pattern, my paper pattern didn't take into account the thickness of the slab. So then I get into bevel cutting the edges. So if you've ever made a wood project, this is something very basic, but a simple way to build, when you're building a hollow ceramic shape this way, because the angle of your cut might be different for each project, of course it will, is, in my case, since it's a square, I know that if I start my cut at the top face and I cut back to the center point of the hollowness, I can get the angle. And you can change that for each one. You locate the point at which represents the center of that particular piece, and then you can cut it at that angle. So since mine's 45 degrees, I've got the confidence of just using gravity and a steady hand. Okay, so I'm going to cut it. I'm guesstimating what 45 degrees is. I'm trying to avoid cutting into the and because this tilts, there's going to be like a 30 degree here, so I'm just going to shave it back from the front a little bit so it connects with the top of this slab. Now I've already pre-beveled these other pieces. Alright, so I'm going to, once you get all this planning done with paper, oh by the way, people that build this way, often, it takes quite a bit of trial and error and other process to develop what these shapes actually are for proportion, how they build the three-dimensional form. So once they get sorted out, especially if you're going to make multiples, and you want them all be similar, instead of this one-time use paper, because laying this on the dampness of the leather hard slab distorts, it starts to change the paper, less precise. You can use something like roofing paper, which can resist moisture, and it has suppleness, and also has archival quality, so it can be used over and over again. So you might want to think about that. So once you get the planning done, it makes the actual construction go fairly quickly. Another advantage of working in leather hard clay, I can pick it up without distorting it. The precision, just in handling it, it's less likely to change mindlessly under my touch as I'm moving it, etc. So I really want to use the scoring. It's really important with drier pieces coming together to have a healthy amount of roughing up. I guess I'll just do it all quickly. Even with the planning, just based on the kind of looseness of my, I think this one probably goes here, but okay, so you can see how that bevel allows this to relax in and become tight. So right away, another thing to give a strength to this weaker connection of the seam is compression. And because my goal is to make something that's really hard and more mechanical, I'm going to work this dryer clay with a more rigid tool and just take this rib and start to, there is moisture here, so I can make changes. Any gaps I can fill with softer material and then continue to compress it in there. Look at that edge from that dryer clay. It just has the structure to come to more. I almost always use paddles too. Oh my God, this is so satisfying. No idea. Okay, let me just get a little soft clay wherever that went. Okay. Quickly go around and get these other ones together. Fill that in. Okay. These got a lot drier in the last hour than I thought they would. It's okay. My bottom piece is not, something is off. I didn't really do a good job with the cutting of the pattern. That's okay. Just cut. Okay, so the top, let's talk about that. Well, first of all, this wall thickness is a good, healthy amount for a small form like this, especially given the geometry of the corners, which bring a geometric structure. So this is pretty impervious to a lot of warping at the moment as it continues to dry and is fired and continues to move in the fire. If I were building a 5-foot tall object, and I was using a wall thickness like this, it might become more important to bring even more reinforcement to these seams, and I would do that with a soft coil that I inlay, probably on the inside. If this is a closed form, especially, I would just kind of like a sewing machine sewing a line. I'm going to punch it into the seams all the way around. And after doing so, I can go back with a wood tool, maybe even just this, and I'm editing, I'm kind of scraping back some and inlaying the rest, and also compressing that coil to bring compressive strength to that coil. Okay, just going to do that part of it. The top, or what I'm calling the top right now. So a flat form like this that's supported just with 4 walls around the edge has a lot of room for deflection in the shrinkage. So although this is a good thickness for this surface, it's possible this could sag as gravity's pushing down. So one thing is you can inscribe a very shallow dome here, so it counters the sagging, you know, that dome form. Or If I had a big platform to put on the top, I might need a whole hidden infrastructure of walls that come up to support the top. So many larger scale ceramic objects have a hidden structure inside. And every time there's a perpendicular piece of clay that intersects either into the top or into the side, I've created a geometric corner that keeps it from warping as it's shrinking. It gives it more structure. So you could have almost like a honeycomb of walls inside, depending on the scale and complexity of the form. So what I'm going to do with this last one though, I'm not going to put that infrastructure in here. I'm going to make a bevel in this and a bevel in that, so it just drops down like a lid. Okay. Again, since it's square, it's 45 degree angle. Oops. This is a little crispier than is desirable. All right, just a little scoring, slipping. Gaps, I'll just fill that in. Get the idea. So now that I have this form, this closed in, I mean, maybe this is the ultimate orientation for what it will be, right? It could be, you can see this piece that's fired. So same project. In this case, knowing this was going to be a base for a neck and a head, it's sort of an architectural base, I knew I really didn't need this center section on what would be the bottom. It makes it lighter, it lets air come in to dry it more evenly. And I still get the benefit of that corner of this flat piece intersecting in the wall to hold it and keep it from warping and moving. So what I wanted to show you this for is because with the geometry of this, now you can get to something by removing material, and still the structure of the corners and the stiffness of the clay allow for you to remove without it collapsing. Like you can see, I started to remove into this to make a more open form. So it's really good to build a form soft with this openness in the wall. Of course, it's really, really difficult because of how the weight of what you're building will move the form with those openings. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and open this one on the bottom. Another thing that opening the bottom does is it gives me access to the interior again. So you can see where I didn't put my coils in part of it. I can finish this more easily now with the coils. What if this were going to be like a sculptural vessel form? So this inside is really available to the person, the viewer, the audience. Of course, this surface would have to be considered like a finished surface, whatever that means. Very different than if it's meant to be a closed form as a stand, I guess. So, a continuation after, this is a very crude, loose thing, but subtle stages of dryness could bring more opportunity to get more of that mechanical geometry by removing, scraping, all those things. Something you've already been doing, I think, in earlier pieces. So I would recommend, you might want to try a small project where you plan something this way, where there might be something that you plan in paper that will help you get to the precision of when the clay comes together, and then go through building something that has this geometric kind of form. Does anybody have a question about any of that? After having put this together, it's really crucial for most projects to slow the drying down. So the slip is definitely in an accelerated drying between two dryer pieces. It's going to want to cause things to move apart. So you just really want to slow it all down under plastic a few days before letting it finish drying for the kiln. Okay. So while we're still gathered, I just want to say everyone should be planning an object to go into a site somewhere. Is sort of this next thing. So I know you've all been working on your pieces, your groupings, and etc., and they should probably be in later stages. Don't forget that as a part of this kind of cooking show idea, you should have things in the kiln as soon as possible to see first glaze tests. First glaze results is a better way to say it. The more you can see in those increments, the more the information you get from seeing them transform that way will show up in the later objects. You factor it into the next piece. So you don't want just one glaze firing for the summer. You want there to be as many different glaze firings across many pieces. So pay attention to that. Be glazing as things are bisque. Go immediately and spend some time in your sessions glazing, as well as building the next flood objects. But Tuesday, I want to have some of our time spent with you sharing the site you've chosen that your object, this sculptural object, will intervene in. It could be outside, it could be an architectural site, somewhere indoors it could be. It just can't be a tabletop. It really needs to be some other place. And so you might want to go shopping for a site, or you might have an idea which will dictate where the site is. There's no right way to get there. But then, of course, the piece has to happen pretty quickly with just a little bit of time left. So probably you won't make a huge object. It could be maybe a more moderately scaled object just for the time restrictions that we're working with at this point. Okay? Also, we're going to be Tuesday on Potter's Wheel. So it's going to be a lot, it's going to feel like a lot's happening at once. All right, so just preparing you for that. And so you can learn the Potter's Wheel on your own with YouTube videos. People do that all the time. They watch these 10-minute videos and then they sit down. But what you don't have with YouTube is a coach. And it's really helpful while you're learning the Potter's Wheel to have someone standing there, seeing your body language, seeing what's happening, to give you pointers about what to try. So I'm a pretty good Pottery Wheel coach, so hopefully that'll be beneficial to do that with you next couple of sessions. Okay, does anybody have anything? Yeah.